The evening sun was setting behind the glass windows of a small cafe called Moonlight Corner, a cozy place known for its soft jazz and warm lights. The tables were full of customers chatting over coffee, while a young man named Eli moved quietly from one table to another, cleaning up plates and wiping spilled drinks. He was shy and polite, always lowering his eyes when people spoke to him, never wanting attention to everyone there. He was just the quiet cleaner, the boy who worked late and left after the crowd was gone. But no one knew that behind those calm eyes was a heart that once beat to the rhythm of music. Every night after his shift, Eli stayed a little longer just to listen. He loved the sound of the cafe's piano, the way it filled the air with magic sometimes. When the cafe's musician left early, Eli would glance at the piano, his hands itching to touch the keys, but he always stopped himself, shaking his head, whispering, "Not again," like it was a secret he didn't want to remember. That night, the manager Victor was in a particularly bad mood. He was a loud man with slick hair, always showing off and trying to impress customers. When he noticed Eli staring at the piano again, he laughed mockingly. "Hey, cleaner boy!" Victor shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "You like looking at the piano? Do you even know how to play it?" Eli froze, his face turning red as people turned to watch. He didn't answer. He just smiled nervously and looked down. But Victor wasn't done. He walked over, smirking. "Tell you what, if you can play that hard piano, I'll kneel right here and call you maestro." The cafe burst into laughter, the customers giggling, thinking it was just a funny joke. Eli tried to smile it off, but inside his chest something ached. The words "I'll kneel right here" echoed in his head, not as a joke but as an insult. One of the waitresses, Lena, frowned from the corner. She had always noticed how humble and kind Eli was. She whispered to Victor, "Stop teasing him. He didn't do anything." But Victor just waved his hand. "Oh, relax, it's just a joke. Let's see if the kid can even touch the right keys." Eli quietly put down the tray he was holding. For a moment, everyone thought he would walk away like always. But instead, he slowly walked toward the piano, his eyes calm, almost sad. The cafe grew quiet. The laughter fading into whispers. Eli stood in front of the piano, brushing dust off the keys gently like he was touching an old friend. His hands trembled, not from fear but from memories. He sat down on the wooden bench and took a deep breath. Everyone waited, expecting a random, clumsy tune, maybe something funny. Victor folded his arms, smiling arrogantly. But when Eli's fingers touched the first key, the air changed. A soft melody filled the cafe. Slow, gentle but powerful. The notes flowed like water, each one carrying emotion that wrapped around every listener. The chatter stopped. Cups were left untouched. Even the waiters stood frozen. Eli's face was calm, his eyes closed as if he could see another world. It wasn't just a song. It was a story told through sound, a story of love, loss, and hidden pain. His hands moved faster, confident, graceful, each note hitting perfectly. The piano that everyone thought was just an old decoration now came alive in his touch. Victor's mouth slowly dropped open, his smirk fading. Lena covered her lips, eyes wide in disbelief. It was like watching a painter create beauty out of thin air. No one in the cafe had ever heard something so emotional. When the final note echoed and faded, silence filled the room. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then someone started clapping softly, then louder, until the entire cafe was applauding, but Eli didn't smile. He stood up quietly, bowed politely, and walked away to continue cleaning like nothing had happened. Victor was speechless. He wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The customers whispered to each other, "Who is he? How can he play like that?" Lena ran after Eli near the back door. "Eli, that was incredible. You never told us you could play like that." Eli smiled faintly and said, "It's nothing. I just remembered something I used to love." Then he picked up his bag and left the cafe, disappearing into the quiet night. But deep inside, his heart was racing. The piano had awakened something he had buried long ago. A memory, a promise, a pain, and though he didn't know it yet, that single performance would soon change everything. The video of that moment, secretly recorded by Lena, would travel across the world, and the man everyone laughed at tonight would soon be known by a name no one would forget. The silent maestro. The night was cold when Eli walked home, the streets almost empty, his breath forming tiny clouds in the air. He held his jacket close, his heart still echoing with the sound of the piano he had just played. Every note replayed in his mind, every memory he tried to bury rising again like smoke from a fading fire. The moonlight touched his face softly, and for the first time in years he felt both alive and broken. He whispered to himself, "Why did I play again?"
Why now?
When he reached his small apartment, he sat by the window staring at the lights of the city. The silence felt heavier than ever, the kind that pressed on his chest until he could hardly breathe. On the wall above his old desk hung a dusty photograph, a young boy smiling beside a woman with gentle eyes. His mother, Clara, once a music teacher and the reason he had ever touched a piano. She used to tell him, "Music is not just sound, Eli. It's how the soul speaks when words fail." He smiled faintly, remembering those words, but then his smile faded, replaced by guilt. Years ago, he had been a prodigy, a rising star in the music world. He was called the boy with golden hands. Performing in national competitions, crowds cheered his name, and his mother watched proudly from the front row, until one day during a performance, she collapsed in the audience. He ran to her in panic, his fingers still trembling from the last note he played. That night, she passed away from a sudden heart attack. Eli was only 17, and from that moment, the music died within him too. He blamed himself, believing his passion had stolen the person he loved most. After her funeral, Eli locked the piano cover shut and promised never to play again. He sold everything, trophies, awards, photos, and left town for years. He drifted from place to place, taking small jobs to survive until one day, he ended up at Moonlight Corner Cafe, cleaning floors and serving people who had no idea of his past. He didn't mind being invisible. In fact, he preferred it. It was easier to live quietly than to face the ghosts of who he used to be. But fate has strange ways of pulling people back to what they're meant to do. That one night when Victor mocked him, something inside him cracked open. For a moment, the silence he had built for years broke apart, and through that small crack, the sound of his mother's laughter returned. He could almost hear her saying, "Don't hide from music, Eli. It's still yours." When his fingers touched those piano keys, it felt like she was guiding him again, and even though he didn't plan it, every emotion, every memory, came out through the melody. He had played not for the people, not even for Victor, but for her. The next morning, Eli woke to the buzzing of his phone. He ignored it at first, thinking it was a spam call, but the sound wouldn't stop. Message after message lighting up the screen. Curious, he unlocked it, and what he saw made his hands shake. Thousands of notifications, likes, comments, shares, and one video thumbnail that froze his heart. It was him, sitting at the cafe piano, eyes closed, playing with his soul. The caption read, "The cafe cleaner who played like a legend." The video had millions of views overnight, people calling him a hidden genius, a miracle musician. He scrolled through the comments. Who is this man? This is pure emotion, not just music. I can feel his pain through the piano. Eli leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was strange. The moment he wanted to keep private had now become everyone's inspiration. And even though the attention scared him, part of him felt alive again. He hadn't felt that in years, not since his mother was alive. Later that afternoon, he returned to the cafe. Everyone stared at him differently now, with respect. Curiosity, even guilt. Victor, the manager, avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy, but Lena ran up to him, her eyes shining. "Eli, you're everywhere online. People love you. Do you realize what this means?" Eli smiled shyly. "It means I should probably look for another job," he said softly. Half joking, Lena shook her head. "No, it means the world finally heard what you've been hiding." Her voice was gentle, and for a moment, Eli felt warmth in her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe music wasn't just something that hurt. Maybe it was something that healed. That evening, when the cafe closed, Eli stayed behind again. He walked up to the piano and ran his fingers across the keys. Each one felt like an old memory, but heavy but familiar. He started to play quietly, not realizing Victor was standing in the doorway watching. Victor didn't say a word this time. He just listened, his face softening with guilt. When Eli finished, he looked up and smiled slightly. "Sorry if I'm staying late again," he said. Victor shook his head. "No, Eli. You can stay as long as you want." For the first time, there was respect in his voice. When Eli left that night, he looked up at the stars and whispered, "Mom, people are listening again. But this time I'll play for love, not fame." He didn't know what the future held, but deep inside he felt a spark, the same spark that once made him believe in miracles. The past still hurt, but the pain now carried purpose. And though the world knew him as a mystery, Eli knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere between silence and melody, his story had started again, and soon the world would know not just the sound of his music, but the heart behind it. The next morning, the city woke up buzzing with something unexpected. A video of a cafe cleaner playing the piano had exploded across every social platform. The man in the clip was quiet, humble, wearing a simple gray shirt, yet his music sounded like it came from another world. That man was Eli, though he didn't know yet how much his life was about to change. In the small apartment he rented, Eli's old phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages flooded in from unknown numbers, notifications flashing faster than he could read them. He rubbed his tired eyes and sighed, thinking it was another prank. But when he opened one of the messages, his heart nearly stopped. There it was, a video of him, sitting at the cafe piano, eyes closed, playing the melody that came from his soul. The caption read,
"Cafe cleaner shocks everyone with a heartbreaking piano performance."
The view count climbed by the second, thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. The world had seen his secret. Eli froze, unable to look away. He played the video again, hearing his own notes echo through his tiny room. It felt unreal, like a dream he hadn't asked for. He scrolled through the comments. I can feel his pain in every key. Who is this man? He deserves a stage. That manager should be the one cleaning tables now. People were moved, inspired, even angry that someone so talented had been mocked. But Eli didn't feel proud. He felt exposed. That piano was the only place he let his heart speak. And now the whole world had heard it. Meanwhile, at the cafe, the morning was chaos. Reporters and curious strangers crowded outside, cameras flashing, hoping to catch a glimpse of the piano cleaner. Victor, the manager, was sweating bullets. He hadn't even had his morning coffee when someone showed him the viral video on their phone. When he saw himself in the clip laughing at Eli before the performance, his face turned pale. The part where he had said, "If you can play that hard piano, I'll kneel right here," had become the internet's favorite quote. People were tagging him, calling him arrogant, cruel and heartless. He realized for the first time how badly he had humiliated someone who was far greater than him. He muttered under his breath, "What have I done?" Inside the cafe, Lena couldn't stop smiling. She had been the one who recorded the video, though she never meant for it to explode like this. She just wanted to show the world something beautiful, something real, and now that it had gone viral, she felt both proud and protective of Eli. When she saw him walk in quietly that afternoon, wearing the same simple shirt, she rushed to him. "Eli, you saw the video, right?" she asked excitedly. "You're everywhere. The world loves you." Eli smiled weakly, brushing his hair aside. "Yeah, I saw it." His voice was soft, uncertain. "I didn't want this attention, Lena," he said. "I just wanted to play one last time." She placed her hand on his arm gently. "Maybe it's not your last time. Maybe it's the start of something new." Victor, standing a few feet away, approached slowly, his face red from embarrassment. "Eli," he began, awkwardly scratching his neck. "About the other night." Eli stopped him with a small smile. "It's okay, Victor. You don't need to say anything." But Victor shook his head. "No, I do. I was wrong. I thought you were just some shy cleaner. I had no idea." Eli chuckled softly. "That's because I wanted it that way." For a moment, silence filled the cafe. The sound of the espresso machine humming softly in the background. It wasn't anger that filled the room, but something heavier, humility and realization. By evening, news outlets began calling the cafe. Everyone wanted to interview the mystery pianist. Music producers sent messages offering him contracts. Talent agencies wanted to represent him. Eli didn't respond to any of them. Instead, he went back to the piano, sitting quietly in front of it once more. The same crowd that once mocked him now gathered respectfully, waiting to hear him play again. He ran his fingers over the keys, smiling faintly, and began to play a soft, simple tune, something pure and unpolished. The cafe fell silent again, just like before. But this time the silence was filled with awe, not doubt. It wasn't about showing skill or proving anyone wrong. It was about remembering why he had ever loved music in the first place. After closing, Lena found him outside, sitting on the steps with a cup of coffee. "You know," she said, sitting beside him, "people are calling you the silent maestro now." Eli laughed quietly. "The silent maestro? Sounds dramatic, but it fits," she replied with a smile. "You don't say much, but your music does all the talking." Eli looked up at the stars and sighed. "I used to think my music died with my mother," he said softly. Lena tilted her head. "And now?" He paused, watching the reflection of the city lights dance in his coffee. "Now? I think it just fell asleep," he said. "Maybe it's time to wake it up again." That night, when he got home, Eli opened a small wooden box hidden under his bed. Inside was his mother's old silver pendant, a tiny charm in the shape of a treble clef. He held it tightly in his hand, feeling its familiar weight. Then he placed it around his neck, whispering, "I'll play again, Mom, but this time, not to prove anything, just to feel alive." He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, fame, chaos, or disappointment, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel afraid of the unknown, because deep down he knew that when music called, he had no choice but to answer. The boy who once walked with his head down was now standing at the edge of destiny, and somewhere in every corner of the world, people were watching his video, feeling something real. The same music that healed him was now healing others too. And though Eli didn't know it yet, his life was about to be changed forever by a single viral melody that started in a quiet little cafe. The morning sun crept through the thin curtains of Eli's small apartment, lighting the dust that floated in the air like golden snow. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the melody he played at the cafe echoed in his mind. His phone was still buzzing from messages he hadn't opened, invitations, interviews, and even offers from music schools. It all felt strange, like a dream he didn't ask for but couldn't wake up from. For years he had hidden behind silence, and now the world wouldn't stop calling his name. He sat by the window with a cup of black coffee, staring at the street below. Kids laughed on their way to school. People rushed to work. Life moved on as usual, but inside Eli something was shifting, something warm and frightening at the same time. The music he buried long ago was alive again, whispering, growing, refusing to be silenced. He reached for his mother's old pendant hanging around his neck, tracing the tiny treble clef with his fingers. "Are you watching me, Mom?" he murmured softly. "Maybe this is your way of telling me to keep going." That afternoon, Eli visited Harmony Academy, the old music school where his mother once taught. He hadn't stepped inside for nearly 10 years, and every brick, every hallway carried ghosts of the past. The receptionist looked up in surprise when he said his name. "Eli Rowan?" she asked, blinking. "The same Eli who used to win every national piano competition?" He smiled awkwardly. "I guess that was me," she beamed with excitement. "Everyone's been talking about your video. The director would love to see you." Before he could respond, she was already making the call. Moments later, he found himself walking through the long hallway, filled with framed pictures of past students. He stopped at one, a photograph of him and his mother smiling after a concert. He touched the glass gently, feeling a tear form in the corner of his eye. He remembered how she used to guide his hands on the piano, whispering, "Play with your heart, Eli, not your fingers." Those words felt alive again. When he entered the grand music hall, he froze. The stage stood before him like a sleeping giant, the black grand piano shining under soft light. The smell of old wood and polished ivory brought back memories, the sound of applause, his mother's voice cheering, the echo of lost time. He sat down slowly on the bench, his hands trembling slightly. It had been so long, but his fingers remembered the keys like old friends. He closed his eyes and began to play, not a song from memory, but something new. A melody that carried pain and peace in equal measure, a sound that seemed to speak directly to his mother's spirit. The notes filled the hall, rising and falling like waves. Each sound painted the air with emotion, and though the hall was empty, Eli felt as if someone was listening, not from the seats, but from the heavens above. When he finished, he sat in silence, breathing slowly, eyes still closed. Then, a gentle clap echoed from the back of the hall. Startled, he turned and saw a tall man in a suit stepping forward, his face calm but his eyes full of emotion. "I'm sorry," the man said softly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "But that was beautiful." Eli stood awkwardly. "Thank you, sir, I was just—" The man smiled. "I know who you are, Mr. Rowan. I'm Daniel Hale, the director of the National Symphony Foundation." Eli's heart skipped a beat. Daniel continued. I saw your cafe video. The emotion in your playing, it's rare. It's honest. I want to invite you to perform at a performance in memory of fallen musicians. It's not about fame or money. It's about healing hearts with music. And I believe your music can do that. Eli didn't answer right away. He looked at the piano, then back at the man, his mind torn between fear and hope. I don't know if I can, he said quietly. It's been years since I played for people. I'm not sure I'm ready. Daniel smiled kindly. No one's ever ready. Eli, but when music calls, it's not asking for perfection. It's asking for truth. With those words, he handed Eli his card and walked away, leaving the echo of footsteps fading into silence. That night, Eli sat by the piano in the cafe again. The same place where it all started. Lena watched from a distance as he stared at the keys. Lost in thought, she walked up and said softly, You're thinking about it, aren't you? He smiled faintly. You heard about the concert? She nodded. Everyone did. They want you, Eli. Not some superstar. You. He took a deep breath. I'm scared, Lena. What if I fail? What if I can't do it anymore? She placed her hand on his shoulder. You already did it. That night you made people feel something real. That's what music is for. Her words echoed in his heart long after she left. He looked around the quiet cafe, remembering the laughter, the insults, the applause. Then he whispered to himself, Maybe it's time I play not to escape my past, but to honor it. He pressed a single key, a soft note that hung in the air like a promise. For the first time, the sound didn't hurt. It felt like forgiveness. It felt like home. As he packed his things that night, Victor approached him hesitantly. I heard about the invitation, he said quietly. You deserve it, Eli. I'm sorry for everything. Eli smiled kindly. Don't be sorry. You gave me the push I needed. Victor looked down, embarrassed. Still, I meant what I said that night, remember? If you ever play that piano again, I'll kneel right here, Eli chuckled. Then get your knees ready, he said softly. They both laughed, a sound that washed away all the bitterness left between them. As Eli walked home under the glowing streetlights, he looked up at the stars. His heart felt lighter, his spirit clearer. He finally understood. Music wasn't something he had lost. It had been waiting for him to return, and this time he wasn't playing to be heard. He was playing to heal, to honor, and to love again. The days that followed were like a quiet storm for Eli. Everywhere he went, people recognized him. At the market, on the bus, even on the street, strangers would smile and whisper, That's the guy from the video. He wasn't used to attention. For years he had lived in the background of life, unseen and unheard. Now suddenly, the world was looking straight at him. It was both beautiful and terrifying. The invitation from Daniel Hale still sat on his small wooden table. The card looked simple, but to Eli it carried the weight of destiny. It was a chance to play again, not in a cafe, but in front of thousands. He had been asked to perform at the Grand Charity Concert, an event dedicated to musicians who had lost their lives or dreams. He stared at the card every morning and every night. He wanted to say yes, but a voice deep inside whispered, You're not ready. You'll fail. One evening, Lena dropped by his apartment with her usual bright energy. She carried a small paper bag and said, You haven't eaten dinner again, have you? Eli smiled faintly. I wasn't hungry. She handed him the bag. You need strength if you're going to perform again. He froze, looking at her with wide eyes. Who said I'm performing? Lena grinned. Everyone's hoping you will. And I think you want to. You're just scared. Eli laughed softly. Scared is an understatement. Lena sat down across from him, her tone softening. Eli, I've seen what music does to you. It's like breathing. You can't run from it forever. Her words sank into him like rain into dry soil. That night after she left, Eli sat at his piano and played for hours. Not for the internet, not for applause, but for himself. He played the melody his mother once loved, the one she used to hum while cooking dinner. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he whispered, Maybe I can do it, Mom. Maybe I can finally play without pain. The next morning, he made his decision. He walked to the Music Foundation's office, the invitation card in his pocket. Daniel Hale greeted him with a warm smile. Eli, I was hoping you'd come. Eli took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. I'll do it. Daniel's smile widened. I knew you would. You have something the world needs to hear. He handed Eli a folder with all the event details. You'll be the closing act, the final performance. We call it a song for the lost, dedicated to those who never got to finish their music. Eli nodded, his throat tight. Then I'll play for my mother. She never finished hers either. Word spread quickly. The cafe cleaner who became a sensation was going to perform on one of the grandest stages in the city. The media called it the comeback of the century, while musicians called it the return of a true soul. But Eli didn't care for fame or headlines. He only cared about doing justice to the song that lived in his heart. As the concert day approached, he practiced day and night. His fingers danced over the keys with new life, his heart guiding every note. Each melody he played carried a story. His mother's laughter, his pain, his rebirth. Meanwhile, Victor watched everything unfold from afar. He couldn't stop thinking about that night. The night he mocked Eli. Not knowing who he truly was, he had spent days replaying that moment in his mind, feeling the sting of guilt every time. Finally, one afternoon, he walked into the cafe where Eli was practicing. Eli looked up from the piano and smiled. "Hey, Victor." Victor scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. "Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you." Eli tilted his head. "About what?" Victor took a deep breath. "That night. The things I said. I was a fool. You didn't deserve that. You deserve respect." Eli chuckled softly. "I already forgave you, Victor." But Victor shook his head. "No, I made a promise. Remember, I said if you played that piano, I'd kneel right here." Before Eli could stop him, Victor actually knelt on the cafe floor, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, maestro." Truly. The sight made everyone in the cafe gasp. Eli's eyes softened, and he quickly reached out his hand, helping Victor stand. "Don't do that," he said gently. "You don't need to kneel. Just listen when I play." Victor nodded, eyes watery. "Then I'll be in the front row listening." The moment spread online again. Photos of the manager kneeling before the pianist he once mocked. But this time there was no laughter, only admiration. People called Eli the humble maestro, the man who forgave instead of humiliating. Eli didn't chase the fame, but it followed him anyway. What he didn't realize was that his story had begun to inspire millions, people who had given up on their dreams, people who thought it was too late to start again. The night before the concert, Eli stood by his window, the city glowing beneath him. He held his mother's pendant tightly and whispered, "Tomorrow I'll play for you, and for everyone who lost their song." His fingers trembled not with fear, but with purpose. He wasn't just going to play music. He was going to tell a story without words. A story of pain, forgiveness, and the power of returning to who you are. Outside, the world was waiting. Posters of the concert filled the city walls. People lined up for tickets, and somewhere in that crowd, Victor and Lena waited too, proud and anxious. As the clock ticked closer to the big night, Eli closed his eyes and whispered one last time, "Mom, this time, I'll finish the song." The night of the concert arrived like a slow heartbeat, steady, heavy, full of anticipation. The city lights shimmered brighter than usual, and the streets around the Grand Symphony Hall buzzed with excitement. Every seat inside the grand auditorium was taken, people whispering, reporters waiting, cameras ready to capture the return of the silent maestro. Banners outside read, "A Song for the Lost," featuring Eli Rowan. But backstage, Eli sat alone, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees, listening to the faint hum of the crowd beyond the curtain. He wasn't wearing anything fancy, just a black suit and a small silver pendant around his neck, the one that once belonged to his mother. He ran his fingers over it gently, whispering, "Stay with me tonight, Mom." Every nerve in his body felt alive, every breath deeper than usual. He wasn't afraid anymore. But the weight of the moment pressed against his chest. This wasn't about fame or proving anything. It was about finishing what was left undone. A stage assistant peeked in nervously. "Mr. Rowan, you're up in 5 minutes." Eli nodded softly. "Thank you." He stood and stretched his hands slowly, feeling the familiar energy of performance return. The muffled applause from the previous act faded, and the host's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we end with a man whose music touched hearts across the world. Please welcome Eli Rowan." The curtain rose, and the spotlight hit him like a sunrise. He walked out slowly, each step quiet but confident. The hall fell silent, no cheers, no whispers, just pure breathless anticipation. Thousands of eyes watched him take his place at the grand piano in the center of the stage. It gleamed under the lights, waiting for his touch. He sat down, placed his fingers gently on the keys, and took one long, deep breath. For a few seconds nothing moved, then, with a soft exhale, he began to play. The first note was delicate. Like a whisper breaking the silence, it floated into the air, carrying with it something pure, a sound that felt almost like prayer. As the melody grew, the room seemed to transform. The lights dimmed slightly, and all that remained was the sound of the piano and the story it told. Every key he pressed spoke of his journey, the loneliness, the laughter, the humiliation, the forgiveness. He played the pain of losing his mother, the quiet years of hiding, the small miracle of finding music again. It was not a perfect performance, but it was real. His fingers trembled in some moments, but each mistake added to the emotion. The audience could feel every heartbeat behind the sound. Some closed their eyes, others wiped away tears, even the cameras. Recording for broadcast seemed to hum quietly, as if afraid to disturb the magic. In the third movement of his piece, he changed the rhythm. It became brighter, fuller, like sunlight breaking through clouds. This was the part he had written for his mother, a melody she had once started but never finished. He had completed it himself, using fragments of her tune and his own heart to fill the rest. It was their final duet, one that crossed the line between life and memory. As he played, he could almost feel her beside him, her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "I'm proud of you, my son." When he reached the final note, he paused, holding it longer than written. The sound hung in the air like a soul refusing to leave. Then in silence, for a few seconds, nobody moved. Then came a sound and a soft clap, then another, until the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. People stood from their seats, clapping, cheering, crying, shouting his name. Eli sat there, tears streaming down his face. His hands shaking, he smiled, bowed his head, and whispered to himself, "We did it, Mom." Among the crowd, Lena was crying too, her hands clasped tightly in front of her chest. Victor stood beside her, clapping louder than anyone, shouting, "That's my friend. That's Eli." But even Daniel Hale, sitting near the front row, had tears in his eyes. He leaned to the person beside him and said softly, That is why we make music." When Eli stood to bow, the lights softened and a spotlight followed him. He looked at the sea of faces, not strangers, but hearts connected through the same emotion. He didn't see fame, he saw understanding, he saw healing. The applause lasted minutes, long and unstoppable, but the best moment came when the audience began chanting his name. Eli. Eli! Eli! A sound that echoed through the grand hall like a wave of love. Backstage after the performance, people rushed to congratulate him, producers, musicians, even old friends from the academy. But Eli stayed humble, smiling softly, thanking everyone without pride. When Victor and Lena finally reached him, he hugged them both tightly. Victor laughed through tears. "I told you I'd kneel, but tonight, I'd rather stand and clap," Eli smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." Lena looked at him, her eyes shining. "You did it, Eli. You healed everyone in that room." He shook his head gently. "No, Lena. I think they healed me." Outside, as the night breeze cooled the sweat on his face, Eli looked up at the sky. The stars seemed brighter and alive, almost singing. He took a deep breath, feeling peace flow through him like music. For the first time since his mother's death, he didn't feel empty. He felt complete, and as he walked away from the grand hall, his steps light, his heart quiet, he knew that something beautiful had begun, a new chapter, a new purpose he had not just performed. He had shared his soul, and in doing so he reminded the world, and himself, that true music doesn't come from fame or skill. It comes from a heart brave enough to feel. The morning after the concert, the world felt different. The streets seemed brighter, the air felt lighter, and Eli's name was on every screen, every radio and every newspaper headline. "The silent maestro who made the world cry," one article said. Another called him the man who played his soul. But Eli didn't wake up to read any of it. He woke up to the sound of birds outside his window and a gentle calm inside his chest. For the first time in years, he felt peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't depend on applause. He sat by the window with his morning coffee, sunlight spilling across the floor. The silver pendant around his neck glimmered softly. His mother's spirit, alive in every reflection, he whispered, "You'd laugh if you saw this." Mom, you'd say I finally stopped running. The world was calling, interviews, sponsors, concerts, but all he wanted right now was silence. Silence, the kind that wasn't empty anymore. It was full, warm, and alive. Meanwhile, the internet exploded with clips from the concert. Fans from all over the world posted reactions. Some cried while listening. Others wrote how the music reminded them of people they had lost. One comment stood out. He didn't just play notes. He told the story of every broken heart, another said. Eli Rowan taught me that pain can turn into beauty. His music had become more than sound. It had become a message, a bridge connecting strangers through emotion. When Eli returned to the cafe a few days later, the once noisy place had turned into a small temple of admiration. People clapped when he walked in, and Victor greeted him with a proud grin. "Look who's back! The man who broke the internet!" Victor shouted. Slapping him gently on the shoulder, Eli laughed. "I think the internet was already broken." Lena came out from behind the counter, holding a tray of coffee, smiling softly. "You forgot something," she said, handing him a small framed photo. It was a picture from that first night. Eli sitting at the piano, eyes closed, lost in music. She had written a small caption under it, "Where it all began." Eli stared at it quietly, his throat tightening. "Thank you, Lena," he said. "I'll treasure this." Over the next few weeks, life became a rhythm of new beginnings. Daniel Hale offered Eli several invitations, performances across the country, collaborations with orchestras, charity concerts. But Eli didn't want to chase fame. Instead, he asked for something different. "I want to teach," he told Daniel one evening. "Not in a fancy academy, just somewhere children who can't afford music lessons can learn." Daniel looked surprised. "You sure about that? You could be performing for millions." Eli smiled gently. "Millions already heard my story. Now I want to help others write theirs." Soon after, Eli founded a small program called Keys of Hope, a free music school for children who dreamed of playing but had no means. The first classroom was a modest room above the cafe, filled with second-hand instruments and laughter. Every day after closing, the cafe transformed into a tiny music haven. Kids came running in, their eyes wide with curiosity. Eli taught them not just how to play notes but how to feel them, he'd often say. "Don't play to impress, and play to express." And when the children's fingers stumbled, he would smile. "Mistakes are just music learning to speak." Lena often stayed late to help, arranging snacks for the kids and tidying up after class. She loved watching Eli teach and the calm in his voice, the way his eyes lit up when a child got a melody right. Sometimes when the kids left, she'd sit by the piano while Eli played softly. Those evenings were filled with quiet laughter, shared dreams, and unspoken emotions. It wasn't grand or dramatic, and it was simple, real, and full of life. One night, as Eli finished a slow tune, Lena said softly, "You know, you're changing their lives." Eli looked at her and smiled. "They're changing mine." But even as he found joy in teaching, the world kept listening. His concert had sparked something far greater than fame. It had inspired a movement. Orchestras began dedicating performances to the silent maestro. Students across the world started learning his songs. His face appeared on posters, magazines, and music forums, but Eli stayed grounded. He still walked to the cafe every morning, greeting everyone with his quiet smile. He didn't need luxury, because peace had finally replaced the emptiness that fame could never fill. One afternoon, as he packed up after class, Victor walked in with a letter in his hand. "Another invitation?" Eli asked, smiling. Victor nodded. "This one's special. It's from the Ministry of Arts. They want to make you an honorary ambassador for music education." Eli blinked, surprised. "Me? An ambassador?" Victor grinned. "Yeah. Guess the cleaner finally outranked the manager." They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like coming full circle. The same cafe where Eli had once been mocked now echoed with children's laughter and music. The same piano that had witnessed humiliation now stood as a symbol of hope. Later that night, Eli stood alone in the quiet cafe. He touched the piano keys gently, playing a soft lullaby, one he wrote for the children. Each note shimmered in the air like a memory. He closed his eyes and whispered, This is what it was all for." Lena entered silently, watching him from the doorway. "You're still the same," she said softly. Eli smiled without looking up. "I hope so. The world may listen now, but I only play for the ones who need to hear." The world outside roared his name, but inside that small cafe, his heart beat quietly to its own rhythm. He had learned the greatest truth of all, that real music doesn't end when the applause fades. It continues in the hearts it touches. In the dreams it awakens, in the souls it heals. And though people called him the silent maestro, he was never truly silent again, because now, every child who pressed a piano key, every listener who felt his music, carried a small part of Eli's song within them, a song of hope, forgiveness, and rebirth. The evening sky was painted with soft shades of gold and violet as the sun sank behind the tall buildings. Inside Moonlight Corner Cafe, the familiar hum of voices and laughter filled the air. But tonight felt different, calmer, gentler, almost sacred. It had been 1 year since Eli played that unforgettable concert, 1 year since the world met the silent maestro, and now he was back where it had all started. The small cafe that once echoed with mockery, now alive with music and hope. The cafe had changed over the year. The walls were covered with photos of students from Eli's Keys of Hope program, children smiling with their small hands on piano keys, some holding certificates, some mid-laughter. A small sign near the counter read, "Music heals the heart, a legacy of Eli Rowan." Victor stood behind the counter, proud and happy, greeting guests with warmth. Lena was arranging flowers on the stage, the same tiny stage where Eli had once been humiliated. But tonight it wasn't humiliation that filled the air. It was gratitude, joy, and peace. Eli arrived quietly, wearing his usual simple clothes, the silver pendant shining faintly under the lights. He paused at the door for a moment, taking it all in. The piano sat in the center, polished, glowing, almost waiting for him. When Victor saw him, he grinned. "There he is." "The legend returns," Eli laughed softly. "I told you I'm no legend, just Eli." Victor leaned on the counter, smiling. "You can call yourself whatever you like. The rest of us know better." As the evening settled, people began to gather, and old friends, new students, familiar faces, even Daniel Hale had come, quietly sitting in a corner with a gentle smile. It wasn't a grand concert tonight. There were no cameras, no reporters, just warmth, laughter, and hearts connected by the love of music. Lena stepped up to the small microphone, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "Tonight isn't about fame or awards, it's about returning home, about remembering where the music began." Then she turned toward Eli, her eyes soft. "And there's only one person who can truly remind us of that." The cafe fell silent as Eli walked toward the piano. Every step echoed softly on the wooden floor. He sat down, ran his hand across the smooth surface, and smiled. "This piano," he said quietly, "has seen everything, my fear, my shame, my healing." The crowd chuckled gently, and he continued. "It taught me that music isn't just played. It's lived." Then he placed his fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The melody was slow, tender, full of emotion. It wasn't a song from his past, nor one of his famous pieces. It was new, a song written from the quiet peace he had finally found. The notes flowed like a soft conversation between his soul and the world. Each key carried gratitude, every pause carried reflection. The people in the cafe closed their eyes. Swaying gently, Lena stood near the counter, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Victor wiped his eyes too, pretending it was the smoke from the coffee machine. Halfway through the song, Eli's gaze lifted toward the ceiling, and for a moment, he wasn't in the cafe anymore. He was back in the concert hall, back in the academy, back beside his mother. He could see her smiling face in the haze of memory, her voice whispering, "You finally finished the song." "My son," he smiled, whispering under his breath, "Yes, Mom, we did it." His fingers moved faster now, weaving sorrow and joy together like threads of light. The final note lingered in the air, delicate and eternal. When it faded, silence followed, deep, emotional silence that said everything words never could. The audience stood clapping softly, not the loud applause of fame, but the gentle kind that comes from pure love. Eli stood and bowed slightly, his eyes shining with tears. He didn't speak, because he didn't need to. The music had already spoken for him. As people came forward to thank him, one of his young students tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Eli," the little boy said, "when I grow up, I want to play like you." Eli knelt, smiling warmly. "No, you'll play better than me, because you'll play your own story." The boy giggled and hugged him tightly, and in that small embrace, Eli felt everything he had ever wanted. Purpose. Connection, love. When the crowd began to leave, Lena stayed behind to close up. Eli sat at the piano once more, playing quietly to himself. Lena walked over and leaned against the stage. "You always end the night this way," she said softly. He smiled without looking up. "It's the only way I know how to say goodbye." She chuckled gently. "You never really say goodbye. Your music stays even when you leave." Eli looked up at her, his eyes kind and warm. Maybe that's the point of music, to stay behind even when we can't. Their eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between them, unspoken, but deep. Outside, the city lights blinked like stars on earth. Eli packed up slowly, running his hand across the piano one last time. As he turned to leave, Lena called out, "Eli, will you ever stop playing?" He smiled faintly and said, "Maybe one day my hands will stop. But the music won't. It'll live in every person who ever listened." He stepped outside, the cool night air greeting him like an old friend. The moon hung high above the cafe, gentle and silver, just like his mother's pendant resting on his chest. He touched it lightly and whispered, "I kept my promise, Mom. The world heard your song." And as he walked down the quiet street, his shadow long under the streetlights, the faint echo of his last melody drifted from the cafe window. It wasn't loud, but it carried far, through alleys, across streets, into hearts of those passing by somewhere. A little boy hummed the tune without knowing where it came from. Somewhere else. A listener replayed his concert clip and smiled through tears. Eli's story had ended, but his music had only just begun. Because true songs, like true love, true kindness, and true redemption, never fade. They echo softly forever, reminding the world that beauty can be born from pain, and that sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to play again.